All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again for another video. And in today's video, we are going to be giving you the best damage farm team for beginners. Now, this in particular is going to be a little bit tricky since you're probably just starting off, and ideally, you may not have idle. So I've did a little bit of snooping and sweeping and getting all through and trying to find out what the best possible option for you would be, and I've come across a pretty viable option throughout some testing, and I did grab a character that I have not done any damage on. So we're going to scroll all the way down to Aaron, and you can see I do not have any stages cleared or dealt any damage with him. So we're going to get him up to level 30 real quick, and we are going to re-roll him just a few times to see if we can get some good scale. That's good enough. Excuse me. So basically, the way this team is going to work is you're going to have Naruto. Not a lot of people actually know this about Naruto, but he used to be a pretty good buff unit back in the day, and he still does have his buff. So he is a very viable option in case you don't have idle. We do have Dennis on our team as well for our money. We have Law for paralysis and shambles, Gojo for time, stop, and slow, and our last slot is going to be any freeze. So I'm using Ice Buster personally. You can use any freeze. If we just click passives here, you can see that you do have some okay options. Todoroki is just fine. Hayes, Keithan, any of these people that can freeze is going to be just fine for you. But just for the sake, we're just going to be using Ice Buster. So the tricky part about this particular thing is that you need to make sure that you have a unit that can hit air. And that's the particular tricky part that I had a little bit of trouble getting to as far as getting that. Ideally, you would have a completely different team. And a good example would be not, I actually don't have it built right now, so I won't waste the time setting that up. But ideally, you would want a person who can hit air units. So if you ever run into that issue, I personally would take Law out, and you can actually just use any air unit you would want. Ideally, you could use Law, or another good option would be using Fujitora because he has slow and cosmic. You could also use a variety of different people that also have some other cool effects and stuff like that. Law would be the most viable option, but if you don't ideally have it, you could sum them out for Fujitora, which right now I'm probably just going to use Fujitora for the sake of the video, so that way we don't run into any complications. So we're going to come over here, and we can see that Aaron is a green, so we would go into the blue dungeon, because green has type advantage against blue in this wheel here you can see in your units list. So ideally, most of the time your units will be capable of leading themselves on this team. You don't need to worry about all these other units getting attack buff or anything. You just need them primarily for their supports. Dennis obviously being our money gain. My Dennis is going to provide me a little bit more money just because he's evoed and all that stuff. But you can still use him as long as you level him up. He's still going to give you 500 cash as long as you have him at level 30. So this is a pretty good option. Freeze is really OP and people overlook it. We have a slow and a time stop. We have Cosmic from Fujitora. And then we have our buff from Naruto and our money from Dennis. And then Aaron is going to be the person we're grinding. So this is still obviously a little bit tricky. If your units aren't too crazy good, I'm not going to tell you to go into Challenger. So we'll just do a demonstration on Insane in a blue element dungeon. And then that way we don't run into any issues. So whenever you're trying to damage farm, you need to be wary that most of your team for a solo damage farm is going to be all supports. Now, if you're running with all other people, you can honestly just throw whatever you want on your team, because normally they're going to be bringing all those crazy supports. But since we're doing a beginner guide for people that may not want to play with other people, this is the best way that we can do it. So right now we're just going to place a Fujitora up here because he should be able to take down these people pretty easily. And then we're just going to put our Dennis's kind of wherever, just so we can start getting that initial money gain. So for now, we are not going to click auto skip just so we can get a little bit more money out of our Dennises, and we're going to be trying to get these Dennises up as soon as possible. And Fujitora luckily doesn't take that much food, so you don't have to pressure it, but initially you do want to buy that 50 food as soon as you're getting through. So that way you have food on standby. You don't have to worry about it so badly. There will be some complications with this just because ideally this would not be that great of a team to run for this. And as you progress through the game, it will get easier. So we're just going to take things a little bit slow and we're going to fully demonstrate how all of this works. So that way you have a full comprehensive standing on how all of this is supposed to work. And you can just progressively kind of place down things as you need them to defend a little bit better. That way you're not running into any issues. So right now we're going to be focusing on Aaron. I'm not too sure what type he is. He's a full AoE starting, and it looks like he will be a wide AoE circle. So ideally, placing them up here is kind of the best option for most of them, considering that you're going to be hitting the front half the time. So with Aaron, we're just going to set him on strongest because we want that unit stacking to be absolutely impeccable. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stack him up just like this. Because normally whenever you're running a circle unit like this, it's just normally better to run them on strongest because they're hitting the back constantly anyways. And we're going to be trying to stack them up as much as possible. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get these Fujitoras up just a bit more. So that way we don't have to worry about them so much. Alright, so let's get this guy on strongest. So you can see here we have all of them on strongest, except for this guy. And he's doing about 100k with his self-lead and being level 30. And ideally, you would want them to get pretty high damage, at least a billion per one of them. Obviously, Aaron's a UR, so he's not going to be hitting too crazy numbers in here. But as you can see, we're going to get our Fujitoras up, and you can see here that I'm not really struggling that much with money. We're only at wave 11. Obviously, idle is going to be way more ideal. If you have idle, you can literally just take off Dennis and Naruto, and you would be able to bring another support of your choice, depending on what kind of team you can build at the time of watching this, and all that good stuff. So now we're going to be placing our Gray up here, so that way we can get him up. We're not going to be worrying too much about his raise attack, because I personally do not care. I'm more so interested in him for his freeze, and he is a bit expensive. So right here, you can tell that right off the bat that freeze is going to help you out a lot because it's going to make them stack up, which is exactly what you want to deal the most damage. So ideally putting your freeze in the front is going to benefit you more than having him way in the back. And if you do have a Fujitora and Gojo, they're going to get slowed even more from having the cosmic and slow buff applied to them, so it's going to be very helpful. Hybrid units typically will run a little bit better in here simply because you're hitting these pesky air units too, and it's going to benefit you a lot as well. But you can tell I don't have a high damaging team, and I'm not expecting to get past probably wave 35 with this. The money is a bit of a hindrance on here, but you'll experience that a little bit until you get your idle, and it will kind of probably annoy you. So the problem here is that we need to get Naruto up, and then all we're going to do is click his auto ability, and we're going to be buffing everything. So we're getting that damage buff. As you can see here, he's getting the same amount of damage buff that you would just about get from idle. Idle gives a 250%, and Naruto still will be giving a two times, which would be 200%. So once that damage buff runs out, you can just proc your other Naruto. You can place on a third one. Make sure to keep your units fed. And then whenever that one runs out, you can proc your next one. And then once you have all four down, you can wait and see if that one runs out as well, because your units should be capable of knocking out most of this. So as you can see here, we're just going to stack this on top of that. So as you can see here, you can run an infinite chain buff and not have to worry about it and hardly ever watch it anyways. And what we're going to do is we're going to be placing down all of our Gojos up here as well, just to make sure we're proccing all of that slow. And he's also going to be hitting those air units for us as well. So now that we have slow and cosmic, we'll be dealing extra damage and slowing them down a increased amount. And then with all of this other stuff, so we can place down another Aaron. Just go ahead and get him down. Set him to strongest. Alright, so we can place down 5 Aarons. You can see we've done just about 30 mil on that front one. And we've done 60 mil on that one, which is not too bad. Ideally the URs are probably going to take about 5 to 15 billion on their first Evo if they do have one. Obviously, Aaron doesn't have an Evo, but this is primarily for demonstration. So now what we would need to do is we need to turn on auto skip, which is what's going to kind of make most of the magic happen. And what we need to do is once we see these units really start blasting past us, we need to make sure that we're focusing really hard on getting them all stacked up. And you can kind of pop your time stop whenever, and ideally you're going to be wanting to make sure you're staying on top of that food at every second, because the food is probably going to be your biggest enemy as far as this goes. And you can see here, we have just north of 100 million on some of these, which is pretty good. Obviously, I didn't feed them properly, which is the problem that you may have on this. So as long as you're staying on top of your food, you're going to be getting about 500 mil to a billion per run, which ideally for a beginner is very good. And obviously this team may change and swap a little bit based on what you have and who you're trying to farm for. But still being able to complete most of your damage task in one run is very good. I would say ideally for a beginner, you're going to be running anywhere from 5 to 10 runs, depending on who you're trying to Evo. Now, if you're trying to Evo an LR, I would just go ahead and put up the hanger. LRs are not easy to get. You need a very specific team to grind solo LRs. If you have people to play with, obviously that's a different story. Getting them with other people is extremely easy. But as far as that goes, we're going to go ahead and check our Aaron's damage to see how much we got overall from that run. So I would say we probably got about 700 million at most. Yeah, okay. So 700 million damage on an Aaron with a bad team. So that's pretty good. Ideally, 1 billion to 5 billion on most URs. So that would be very, very good. And considering that this is a team with not really a lot of good abilities other than just one time stop and buff, it does run pretty well. And this would be very, very good for a beginner. Like I said, you can interchange a lot of stuff if you think you have some better things in this. But ideally, if you're just starting off the game and you just got some summons down, this would be very ideal. But like I said, you can kind of run whatever as long as you have buff and money. The supports are of your choice. I just recommend slow and having some type of stun, freeze, or paralysis. And that way you're maximizing the amount of stacking and the amount of damage that you're dealing to one. The circles and stuff like that, if the person you're doing is DOT, set them the strongest. If your person is aligned, put them up in the front and set them to last. You know, there's a lot of options you can take for grinding out these characters' damage and maximizing it. And if you're more of a late game player, I will release a video later on telling you how to farm as a late game player with a bunch of Evos. But I'm sure at this point most people know how to farm damage. But I will be giving the solo method in another video. I hope this video was extremely helpful, and hopefully you guys are enjoying your time in AWTD. Obviously, come check out the server. I'm very active in there, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.